Hello listeners, I'm Shahnaz Weiss with Iraq Matters. This week we shed light on the current state of the Iraqi-US relationship. We also experiment with a new program format, so be sure to let us know what you think. This week's program includes an Iraq update with Joel Wing, excerpts from recent speeches by Iraqi Foreign Minister Hoshyar Zubari and Iraq's new ambassador to the US, Lukman Faily, and for our Culture Corner we're joined by Professor Bilal Wahab. But first, a campaign update. Our petition on change.org to put Iraq back on the agenda now has the support of more than 5,100 signers, moving us closer to our goal of 10,000 signatures. As you listen to this podcast, please take a minute to invite your family and friends to support our campaign by sharing the link iraqmatters.org. That link, iraqmatters.org, redirects you to our petition page on change.org, where you can sign the petition and also find useful social media sharing tools. Today is Friday, October 11. It has been 669 days since President Obama last met with Iraq's Prime Minister or made any public statement about an ongoing U.S. commitment to the people of Iraq. Join us in urging the Obama administration and Congress to do more to support renewed diplomacy and humanitarian action for peace in Iraq. Next is Joel Wing with the Iraq update.
All right, well, thank you for joining us. So could you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in Iraq lately?
Hi, I'd like to talk about some major developments in Iraq over the past couple weeks. First, obviously, is the security situation. Believe it or not, things have gotten worse. According to the United Nations and Iraq body count, the number of people killed per day has doubled to 20 people killed since the beginning of the year. And even worse is that there's more and more stories appearing of sectarian attacks between Sunnis and Shias. So, for example, in Basra, the Sunni endowment had to shut down its mosques for a while due to threats and attacks upon its members. In Dhikar, there was reports of a Sunni tribe being attacked and some of their families fleeing the province. In Baghdad, there was 2 different stories about bodies being found, dumped, handcuffed, and shot in the head. And in Sadr City, there's a bombing of a funeral procession, and afterwards there's 2 mini riots in the neighborhood. People blocked off the streets. There's militiamen seen in the streets. They arrested some people that they thought were responsible for the bombing, and they demanded the people turned over. They wanted to execute them in the middle of the streets. So there's a real breakdown in civil society in Iraq going on right now. It's really, really bad. And the major cause is the breakdown in politics in Iraq. Sunnis feel like their politicians and political parties such as Iraqi have failed them. The Sunni protest movement really hasn't achieved any meaningful goals. After the Iraqi security forces went into the Hawija protest site in May, there's just been a huge escalation of violence, and it seems like more and more people think that violence is the way to achieve their goals. And now the Sunni population, the Shia population is seeing the government can't protect them, and they're taking matters into their own hands. So it's looking really, really bleak, Iraq security-wise. Politically, there's been 2 major things. There was elections in Kurdistan that shook up the political map there. The 2 ruling parties, the KDP and the PUK, have held on to power since the 1990s. The KDP came out with the most votes. That's led by President Barzani. But the PUK, which is headed by Iraq's president, Talabani, had a huge drop-off. They came in 3rd. And the opposition, there's 3 opposition parties led by Goran, which is the change list, and 2 Islamic parties. They have a real stronghold in Kurdish politics now. The question now is whether they're going to be integrated into the government or not. There's a big conversation about should they join the government, should they stay in opposition. If they do join the government, are they going to get any real meaningful positions, or are they just to be co-opted by the ruling party? So that's really interesting developing in Kurdistan. Another thing, Iraq's parliament is arguing over the election law for next year's parliamentary elections. There's a whole bunch of debates over the small issues, but it seems like the major parties agree that they should have more control over the seats that are going to be won. So they want to, for example, increase the number of votes that are necessary to win a seat. They want to increase what's called the compensatory seats, which is the votes that go to small parties that didn't win seats. Those votes get distributed amongst the winning parties. And so basically they're arguing over details, but the major parties want to have more seats for themselves to centralize control and gain more power. And the very last thing is that today there are protests across several cities across Iraq, Baghdad, Najaf, Qadisiyah, some other cities against the pensions for politicians in Iraq. The politicians in Iraq have huge privileges, and one of them is that no matter how long they serve in office, once they retire, they get up to half their salaries, which is a huge amount of money they get already, and they get all these other benefits as well. So this is the second time people in Iraq have come out to protest against that. They want the government to end all these pensions and the privileges for Iraq's politicians, and that's put some pressure on the government because elections are coming up and they want to seem like they're serving the public. But I very much doubt they're going to get rid of all their privileges. That's part of running and becoming a politician in Iraq, is all the money and power. And
well, thank you for the update.
Thanks.
Great.
Now here's Chelsea, who will MC this week's podcast.
To begin, we hear selections from a recent statements forum with Iraqi Foreign Minister Hoshyar Zubari at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In this first clip, Mr. Zubari talks about the challenges that Iraq continues to face, including recent domestic unrest and the progress that Iraq is seeking to make toward a more prosperous, stable, and peaceful future.
As the Arab Spring has shown, countries that are going through transitions are at risk of foreign intervention and domestic violence. In Iraq, we are confronting all these challenges and more, but we are also making progress towards stabilizing our society, growing our economy, building our democracy, and developing good relations with all our neighbors. 10 years after the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, the better future that we seek is still a goal, not a given. But some conclusions are as clear as anything can be in our region and in these times. For all the suffering we have endured, the people of Iraq and our neighbors are much better off now than Saddam is gone. Iraqis are forever grateful to the sacrifices that the Americans have made in time, in treasures, and in blood. Iraqis, of course, have endured even greater losses. And as the recent attacks of terrorism have reminded us, our ordeal is not over. The Iraqi people and our government intend to redeem these losses by building a future worthy of our sacrifices. After decades of dictatorship, 3 disastrous wars, international isolation, economic sanctions, the displacement of more than 1 million Iraqis, and the deaths of tens of thousands more, including the latest victims of terrorism, Iraq is embarking on building its economic future, democratic future, and building bridges within our society and with our neighbors. As Iraqis, as we rebuild our country, Iraq and the United States will benefit by building a long-term partnership. Together, we can and must develop what President Obama has described, and I quote, as a normal relationship between sovereign nations, an equal partnership based on mutual interest and mutual respect. With our political progress, our economic progress, and our diplomatic progress, Iraq is taking its place as a partner for the United States, for our neighbors, and for the family of nations. On the political front, we are building a multi-ethnic, multi-party democracy with respect to the rule of law. Our democratic process is moving forward at a strong and steady pace. Our local elections took place in April of this year. In Iraqi Kurdistan, there would be regional elections in September this year, and our legislative and general elections would take place next spring, 2014, which will determine our national leadership, and that would be a very, very important date to watch. We have a government of national unity. Now all the communities participate in the working of the government and of the parliament. Yes, we have differences of opinion, as all democracies do, but we are working together, and slowly but surely our efforts are achieving results. We are promoting human rights. There has been violations, which we admit, but there are constant efforts to improve on that and to be responsive to all calls, and also the freedom of expression and the advancements of women. There has been demonstrations and sit-ins in Iraq, in many provinces, in the western part of Iraq, in some Sunni provinces in Iraq for the last 8 months. And they have cut roads, they have sit-ins, they have obstructions, but the government have not resorted to the same methods the Egyptian recently used or deployed to disperse the demonstrators. All the political parties have accepted election as a method of power sharing and peaceful change. Iraqis want to decide their own future with voting, not violence.
As highlighted by Mr. Zubari, Iraq has one of the fastest growing economies in the world, expanding by 10.5% in 2012. He said this year Iraq's economy is expected to grow by 8.2%, beating China for the third straight year. Additionally, oil production is expected to increase to 4.5 million barrels per day by the end of 2014, representing a doubling of production since 2005. However, Mr. Zubari acknowledged that Iraq's growing oil wealth is no panacea. Echoing Professor Bilal Wahab's warning about the oil curse, Mr. Zubari emphasized ongoing challenges to Iraq's development and the role that the United States can play as a genuine partner for peace and prosperity.
In spite of this progress, we have challenges that we are working to address. 90% of our economy depend on oil. Our employment rate is 11%. Our poverty line rate is 23%. Although there has been significant progress over the last few years in meeting the development millennium goals set by the United Nations. In order to diversify our economy beyond energy, Iraq is investing oil revenues in education and crucial development projects, including restoration of electricity power and rebuilding our transportation system. Our economy will benefit from our progress on the diplomatic front as well. Last month, the United Nations Security Council removed Iraq literally from Chapter 7 sanction regime, which imposed economic and other sanctions on Iraq after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait 22 years ago this month. We are working with the International Monetary Fund, as well as the World Bank and the Arab League and the OIC and many other regional and international organizations as a fully responsible member again of the international community. Now we are moving towards a market economy friendly to foreign investment. Americans can provide that what our nations need through investment and trade, not charity and aid. We need the expertise on energy, technologies, engineering, design, constructions, and financial services. Iraq offers Americans tremendous investment opportunities for American developing and servicing schools, bridges and highways, healthcare, water treatment, telecommunications, and much more. And this is what our agreement for the strategic framework agreement covers between Iraq and the United States. But make no mistake, nothing that we build together will endure unless we win our war against terrorism and the war to stabilize the country and ensure security for all the people of Iraq.
In our last last excerpt from the Foreign Minister's speech, he speaks on Iraq's role in the Syrian conflict, the need to fully implement the Strategic Framework Agreement, and touches on the economic partnership which Iraq and the U.S. already have. The Strategic Framework Agreement, which was put into place in 2008 and outlines the political, economic, cultural, and security ties between the U.S. and Iraq, is aimed at assisting Iraq in post-war reconstruction and the reinforcement of Iraqi sovereignty. It is crucial for the U.S. to maintain its commitment to this agreement.
The government of Iraq is committed to implementing UN Security Council resolution promoting peace in Syria. In keeping with our position against the militarizations of the conflict, we are doing our utmost to prevent the shipments of arms across our borders or airspace by whoever. But we cannot do this without the capabilities and the sophisticated, integrated defense system that we lack, and this is what we have been asking from our friends to help us. This is one more reason why the United States and Iraq need to deepen our partnership and to combat terrorism. We need to continue to fully implement the Strategic Framework Agreement that our countries signed before the withdrawal of the American forces in 2011. That means expedited delivery of promised military cells as well as assistance in counterterrorism and enhancing the capacity and the capacity of our security forces. Short of reintroducing American troops in Iraq, nobody is calling for the redeployment of American forces, but under the Strategic Framework Agreement, there is a great deal of room, of space for security cooperations to enhance our common fight against terrorism. Iraq is also in the process of purchasing over $10 billion worth of military equipment, mainly from the United States and other countries. We are paying for it with our own revenues, and we want to buy this hardware from the American allies. Our recent purchases of 30 Boeing planes for our national carrier testifies to our potential as a market for American companies, American products, and American services.
Now, we will play selections from a recent event hosted by Brookings Saban Center for Middle East Policy with Iraq's new ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Lukman Faily. In this first excerpt, the ambassador talks about the Arab Spring, the Syrian conflict, and the critical importance of a renewed and lasting relationship between Iraq and the U.S. Ambassador Faily also speaks about why the U.S. should view Iraq as an ally in the Middle East. Recently, there's been a difference of opinions from Iraqi and U.S. officials on how the U.S. can support Iraq's effort toward security and stability in the region. An article on foreignpolicy.com highlighted the idea that Iraq is interested in using drones to attack al-Qaeda-linked militias inside Iraq's borders. In addition, Lukman Faily reiterated the need for drone support to help track terrorist movements in Iraq. However, the U.S. has denied such requests, and the Obama administration in the past was drone-friendly.
Needless to say, Iraq's own security has been adversely impacted by the region's instability and in particular by the situation in neighboring country Syria. In recent months, level of violence in Baghdad and elsewhere have spiked off, as Al-Qaeda and its affiliates trying to push Iraq towards civil war. Amid this background, Iraq seeks to strengthen its relationship with the United States in order to help stay on track toward establishing a strong, democratic, prosperous country that is a source of stability in the region. Bearing this in mind, I have been dispatched by my government with the primary mission of nurturing an enduring partnership with the United States. Our message to our American friends is simple, but it's urgent. In a region that is filled with so many uncertainties, Iraq can be trusted and it can be a reliable ally. There are no illusions here. And we are under no illusions, and neither should you. Much work needs to be done on both sides for this vision and a strong, enduring partnership to become a reality. But we do not need to start from scratch. Our two countries have endured much together over the past decade. Both of our great nations have made great sacrifices for the sake of establishing a free and democratic Iraq. On that note, I would like to extend my country's appreciation to all the American servicemen and women who served in Iraq, some of whom paid the ultimate price for the sake of free and democratic Iraq. I was honored that one of my first duties as the new Iraqi ambassador in Washington was to visit the Arlington Cemetery, or Arlington Memorial, to pay a tribute to your fallen sons and daughters. The nature of our bilateral relationships has been articulated through the Strategic Framework Agreement, which was designed by our two countries at the end of 2008. It outlines the basis for long-term friendships and cooperation, based on the principle of equality in sovereignty. It defines areas of cooperation across a whole host of political, economical, cultural, and security areas. Among its core principles, the agreement states, and I quote, "A strong Iraq capable of self-defense is essential for achieving stability in the region." Let me repeat it again. A strong Iraq capable of self-defense is essential for achieving stability in the region.
Ambassador Faily went on to assert that economic and political cooperation, including trade and investments in Iraq's economy, is crucial to strengthening their nation, so that Iraq can be a better leader in bringing peace and stability back to the Middle East. The U.S. and Iraq plan to renew their strategic partnership in building Iraq's transportation infrastructure. The U.S. stated its commitment towards aiding in Iraq's preparation for an audit by the International Civil Aviation Organization. Finally, the U.S. will provide further assistance towards building Iraq's aviation infrastructure with better security and navigation surveillance. These developments reveal that there is already progress toward a strong U.S.-Iraqi cooperative economic relationship.
Just last month, my own minister, Minister Zubari, was here in Washington making the case for greater security cooperation and reaffirming our commitment to the Strategic Partnership Agreement with the United States. While security and defense cooperation is important, we believe that trade and commerce should be at the heart of any endeavor to foster deeper and long-lasting ties between our two countries. Iraq has the fastest growing economy in the region, and it is expected to grow at a rate of 9.4 annually throughout to 2016. But this growth is mostly derived from our oil production, which has eclipsed Iran to become the second largest OPEC producer. Diversifying Iraq economy and attracting investment capitals and foreign expertise are among our top priorities, more so for me here in the United States. Last month, I went to California to meet with the business leaders from among the Americans' most successful enterprises. And I was delighted to hear their enthusiasm for the Iraqi market. And in the meantime, Iraq is purchasing $10 billion worth of military equipment from the U.S. companies and firms. America's top energy companies are already working in Iraq. And our recent purchase of 30 Boeing planes for our Iraqi national carrier testifies to our potential as a market for U.S. goods and services. To summarize, amidst the turmoil and uncertainties in the Middle East, we are more determined than ever to build an enduring partnership with the United States. Much work needs to be done to strengthen our democracy, to counter the rising threat of terrorism, and to rebuild a strong and prosperous nation that can help alleviate some of the region's misfortunes. We see in the United States a fitting partner to help us realize our own full potential. Thank you very much.
The event ended with an exchange between Ambassador Faily and moderator Kenneth Pollack regarding the Strategic Framework Agreement of 2008 and the importance of making progress to advance that framework. Recently, the U.S. Department of Energy's Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability delivered the final workshop of the Iraqi Energy Reliability, Survivability, and Resilience League program to 20 engineers from Iraq's Ministry of Energy in Baghdad to promote the best practices in electricity delivery and maintenance. Overall, this program, which is funded by the Department of State, helped to train over 90 engineers to help Iraq deliver essential services to its citizens. This was part of the Strategic Framework Agreement between the U.S. and Iraq. However, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I think that's a great way to kick us off. You covered a lot of ground in those brief remarks. And I thought that I would start with the core of our relationship. And you mentioned that Foreign Minister Zubari was here to reaffirm the commitment to the partnership between the two countries. And you also mentioned the Strategic Framework Agreement, which was intended to be the blueprint for a comprehensive partnership between the two of us. I think it's safe to say, I don't know if you'd agree with me, I think you would, though, that both countries have really fallen down in turning that into something meaningful, into something that really could be a tangible partnership. And I'd love to ask you for your thoughts on what you'd like to see from the American side in terms of turning the Strategic Framework Agreement from something on paper into something in reality, and then also, obviously, what we should expect from Iraq on that same score.
Sure. Thank you very much for starting on such an important topic. The Strategic Framework Agreement was signed in 2008, just before President Obama came to power, with a view of ending the military presence of the United States and starting to work on a comprehensive relationship. The framework highlights areas of cooperation in security and military cooperation, in commercial, in cultural, in medical care, and so on. In education, so on. So we can see that two countries both agreed to supplement and support each other in defining the areas of cooperation. With that in mind, you also have the realities of the U.S. troop withdrawal after 2011, which meant that the relationship has somewhat transformed from one of U.S. presence to one of sovereignty, and in which the relationship is one of partners. To us, that new definition has become transformational in our institutions. Likewise, I feel that in the United States, they are somewhat unfamiliar with such a new framework. Historically, U.S. forces usually used to maintain in the country before, and the relationship was one of bilateral based on specific sectors. Here we have a comprehensive relationship. I feel as though that both countries are on experimentary role here. And both countries are trying to identify areas of cooperation in which both feel it's urgent and both feel that they're capable of providing support to each other. With that in mind, I think we in Iraq need to relook at our strategic view of relationships. We as a country are new to having strategic relationship with any country. I was in Japan and I had that challenge all the time, in which we as a country have a mentality of one size fits all. Now we have a strategic relationship. To change that mentality, it means that we need to look at preferential relationship in areas such as energy or others. That's, to me, one of the homeworks I have to work on. From the United States perspective, I feel as though that is new to them as well. To get sight of Iraq and understand the potential of Iraq versus the legacy of Iraq in the U.S. discourse. I feel that currently Iraq has a negative connotation here in D.C. And to me, that's a strategic issue. And to me, that's an area in which I hope to change. More importantly, I think it's in the U.S. interest that the investment in Iraq is rewarded. People of Iraq want to embrace that relationship. I come in with the full support, not just of government, more so of the people. I'm not aware of any stakeholder in our own internal politics who would like to have but a strong relationship with the United States. We are choosing that relationship. There are no longer U.S. forces there. It's important that the U.S. audience understand that. We are choosing that relationship. However, we are choosing it on areas in which we need that type of support. We need that type of stability for our political, economical, and also we're talking about even the education, for example, of our students.
In both of their speeches, Foreign Minister Zubari and Ambassador Faily expressed Iraq's strong interest in renewing and improving relations with the United States. They emphasized that with increased security cooperation and economic investment, Iraq can be an effective strategic ally of the United States in the region. While in past years some in Washington have claimed that Baghdad has lost interest in continuing close relations with the U.S., that no longer appears to be the case. We look forward to seeing how the Obama administration responds to Iraq's overtures for renewed cooperation, especially in reducing violence, assisting vulnerable populations, strengthening democratic institutions and processes, and improving good governance and education for all Iraqis.
Next is Professor Bilal Wahab with the Culture Corner.
So, Bilal, can you tell us something about Iraqi cuisine?
Iraqi cuisine is good. It's addictive. I have a lot of American friends who fell in love with it. There are two kinds of cuisines in Iraq. The kind of cuisine that you get at restaurants, which is, kebab and masgoof and, general grills and khozi. But there are also the kind of cuisine that you get in homes. And that's where the fun is. That's where, talking about dolma, for example, talking about
is that the
kufta. Dolma is the stuffed vegetables, grape leaves
right.
and other kind of, leaves that are, it's called stuffed with rice and ground beef and raisin. Kufta is another good Iraqi dish. In Baghdad and in the south, there's tharid. Tharid is like, broth and you dip bread in it, which is delicious. You eat it with your hands. It's very good. But the most famous Iraqi dish probably, is a combination between dolma and the masgoof fish.
And of those two, which is your favorite?
I can't say. I love them both.
Right,
I love
dolma.
I love dolma. In Kurdish, they say if a man loves dolma, it's an indication that he loves his wife.
So then...
I fall in that category.
That's a good category to fall into.
Thank you.
I had the privilege of both times I went to Iraq of eating masgoof. Do you know which area in Iraq is the most famous for masgoof?
Baghdad. Abu Nawas is the most famous for it, as far as I know.
Okay. And then my second question for you is, what is trending with the Iraqi youth?
With the Iraqi youth, they are getting into cars. There's a lot of, of course, for people who have wealth, very fancy cars. I mean, in Kurdistan, for example, it's very common for you to see lots and lots of SUVs, including, Lexus and Range Rovers, but also, sports cars like, Mustang and Camaros and even convertible Audis that are trending. So, the youth are into cars. If they cannot afford a fancy car, they at least will be, driving a car of sorts, which, gives them mobility. I guess the other thing that's trending is soccer. Not much domestic and local Iraqi soccer, but European soccer. So there's this rivalry between, Barcelona fans and Real Madrid fans. And it gets weird. It gets really tense. I mean, for example, in the Iraqi, tradition, if someone passes away, they hang a black banner, at the workplace or near the home, and they say, we give condolences to this person who died, and they announce, where the funeral is going to be. When there is a match between Real and Barca, after the games, whoever loses and wins, they hang black banners and they say, we we give our condolences, to the fans of Barca for their, miserable loss yesterday at the games. And of course, people come to the streets and pull the horns, and they make noises. So these European soccer matches are also a big deal. I guess I'll point to those two things being trending.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Before we go, if you ever have any questions or comments, we would really love to hear from you. You can comment on our iTunes. You can send us an email at info@epic-usa.org.
You can also comment on our Facebook page. You can send us a tweet to Enabling Peace. We love to hear from our listeners.
This has been Iraq Matters, an epic podcast of news, ideas, and conversations about Iraq. Thank you so much for joining us. We'd like to thank all of our guests today. Our theme music is Fagh Nakhl by Nazim al-Ghazali, and our transitional music is Rahim al-Hajj's title track, The Second Baghdad. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and Stitcher, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This is Shana Zwais reminding you and friends around the world that Iraq matters.